Hello, welcome to Conquering Columbia. We are here in Badlands National Park, um, which is interesting. That's why I'm not doing it live this week, because we don't have any internet, because we're in a national park. Uh, so this week, our main story is talking about this new report on suicide in America, which has reached a higher rate than ever in our history. And something that people aren't talking about is that it's 80% men. 80% of suicide is from men. But before we get to that, I want to address a few comments that I got on my TikTok talking about my last episode, which was about immigration, specifically about the economy. So, a lot of people said that immigration helps the economy and that means that immigration is just good. And I just fundamentally disagree with that because even if it does help the economy isn't the only factor in what makes a country functional and running healthily. And if you just look at our country right now, you could say the economy is doing pretty bad. But even if it was doing well, I'd still say that we're not doing good as a country. Morally, we're degrading. Um, Socially, we are becoming more isolational. We're not interacting with people as much, especially after COVID. I'll get into that later. But you also have to keep in mind that the economy typically just represents GDP or the Dow Jones or how businesses are doing. It doesn't really represent how the average person is doing. And even GDP per capita doesn't really represent how the average person is doing because immigration affects wealth and the wealthy versus the poor and then the middle class. A lot of these people coming in are poor. They're providing cheap labor to the upper class. And that means that the middle class that would typically benefit from a lot of these labor jobs are having their jobs stolen in favor for the lower class. And so immigration actually shrinks the middle class. And the left loves to talk about immigration. And they love to talk about how the middle class is shrinking and how we need to implement socialism for that. But like I said last week, if you want your country to run and to function and you want to keep your jobs with a livable wage, then don't let 7 million people into your country every year. But now on to the regular part of the show, the story, the main story of the week. So this is from the what is this? The New York Post. Cowboy mentality of wanting to quote man up could be a factor in the epidemic of male loneliness, a New York University professor implied on Sunday. Professor Niobe Way spoke with the Washington Post in a story about the rise in an alternative conception of American masculinity to combat the lack of connection between men. When tackling the epidemic of loneliness plaguing the nation, Way suggested that it comes from an overly masculine way boys are raised. Quote, Niobe Way, a professor of developmental psychology at New York University and the author of Deep Secrets, Boys, Friendships, and the Crisis of Connection, said many boys are raised with what she called the cowboy mentality. I can do it myself. I don't need others. Often perpetrated by the father wanting the son to man up and not be so soft. The whole model of getting help is so-called femininity, the article reads. Quote, women end up being the therapist for their husband, and more are getting sick of it. Mark Green, a founder of Remaking Manhood, a consultancy that works with organizations to help improving men's professional relationships, also spoke with the Washington Post and blamed society for stifling male expression. Quote, if a boy expresses too much emotion or too much need for connection, is too giddy, is too joyful, what we say to that boy is, quote, what are you, a sissy? What are you, a girl? What are you, gay? Green said. It's your job to dominate those around you or you will lose status, and that will increase the number of individuals above you and who can dish out dominance to you. And what we find is that in that system, in that structure, men are constantly in competition with each other and constantly driven by this sense of anxiety. So I think there is something wrong with our current society and there is something wrong with our current system, but it's not what they're describing. It does have to do with male loneliness, and the cause is the society and how the society acts, but it's not traditional masculinity. Um, But I'll get into that. Let me finish this up. Way and Green's diagnosis represents the American Psychological Association guidelines from 2019 that suggest, quote, traditional masculinity based on research is harmful. The main thrust of the subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, domination, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. So, as a male who I think was probably raised in that system, I totally disagree with that. I don't have any of these things that they're talking about. I'd say I'm probably very competitive. I'm pretty stoic. And yeah, I do struggle for dominance because that's how humans and that's how people work. That's just genetics. But we're going to talk about the real causes. And I have a few. And I have a few solutions as well. One main one. So I think they're looking in the right direction. The issue is they're not really finding the correct answers. They're searching, but they're not finding the answers. And I think they're on the path, but they're not going the right direction. So there are a few reasons. First one, and it has to do with this very isolationist society that we've created. And I don't mean isolationist as in we're not invading other countries, because we're still doing that. I mean isolationist as in adults are very isolated from one another. We don't promote community anymore. And you can see that with even people at my age. There's a lack of community after high school. Even if you go to college, you're kind of just thrown out into the world. For 18 years, you've been forced into this community and you've been regulated to make sure that you're part of these other groups and you're part of this community, whether it be your school or your family, and you're pretty much forced to be friends with some people. In college, it's completely different. And I'm on my way to college right now, but I know for a fact that in college, you don't really have to be part of any of those groups. You can be a total loner and you can get by just fine. But that's not healthy for your mental health. And a lot of kids who aren't really forced to go into that community become very lonely and become kind of self reliant in college because they're not forced into these communities like they were in high school and in grade school. And it's even worse for the people that go out of college or that go out of high school and don't even go to college because they don't even have like a community to reach out to if they want to other than their family. And a lot of times these people aren't in great connections with their families. Luckily I am. My family's right here watching the show right now. But and that comes from this very hyper individualistic society. And I'm not anti individualism. I think individualism has a lot of benefits. I think America is a very individualistic from its start, and I don't think that's a bad thing. However, now I think we're hyper individualistic. And right after college, when you turn 18, you're kind of just thrust into this world, and it's very individualistic, so you don't really have a community to rely on. You go to these other societies like in East Asia, like in Japan and China and Korea, and it's not individualistic at all. It's very communitarian. And I don't think that's maybe the best way, but I think, like all things in life, you need a balance. And I think we're way past that balance. We're way too individualistic right now. And I think China's too communitarian or whatever. But right now, we need to bring that more into a balance because we are seeing a lot of people who aren't participating in this society, who are just kind of being thrown out there, are left to the wolves, and people say, well, you got to pick up your bootstraps and go, and you got to take life by the reins and really show life who you are and show the world who you are so you can live. But you got to have backups. You got to have ways. You got to have people that you can rely on and you can fall back on. And in a hyper individualistic society like we're living in now, we don't have that. We don't have anything to fall back on. We're just out to the wolves. And if you get bitten, that's it. And that's why a lot of these people, a lot of these men, because men more than women don't connect with their friends and their families as much, because it's just a genetic thing. Men don't They want, and this has to do with this article, and they're right about this. Men do have this way of they want to do it themselves, but men also want something to rely on, and in this individualistic society, they don't have anything to rely on. They just have themselves. And in a non-individualistic society, a society where it's more normal in the middle, men can be individuals. Men can go out into the world and rely on themselves, but if they fail, they have something to fall back on. They have a community to go back to. And that's what we need to have in America, and we don't have that right now. Another thing, and Ted Kaczynski talked about this, not a great guy, however, he was very smart. Not a good guy. He was crazy, he killed people, but we can learn a lot of the stuff from what he read. People admit that, everyone admits that. Industrial society / post-industrial society. Technology, and a lot of this has to do with men, technology takes over tasks which were once essential and for men specifically. Technology takes over tasks which were once essential for men's lives, and that leaves men with a sense of powerlessness. They feel that they're not really doing the things that they're supposed to be doing because they've been replaced by technology, by AI or machinery, and they feel this overwhelming powerlessness, this overwhelming lacking because they're not doing anything. They're not building, they're not creating, because that's all been taken from them. That's all been stripped from them and replaced by what's more profitable, by what's more economical, and that's machinery, that's AI. And so writers, builders, creators, people who work in the factories, they've all been replaced. They don't see the product of their labor anymore because it's all machinery. And Ted Kaczynski talked about that, and frankly, he's right. So we need to find a middle ground there as well. Also, media. We have constant exposure to media. We have constant gratification from social media and constant exposure to funny videos and movies and Marvel and TikTok, where you can scroll for 6 seconds of video or 10 seconds of video and just go on to something new, and it's constant and it's all around us, and people nowadays don't know how to live life without having to deal with that stuff. They don't know how to live life without constantly getting that gratification from scrolling on their phone and watching YouTube and watching TV even. This has been a problem for decades. TV and movies, people get addicted to these things, and it's a serious issue because you get this dopamine, and it's much like a drug. You get constant dopamine gratification, and these people don't know how to deal with it because it's constant, and in nature it's not constant. There's habitual. It's once a day or twice a day when you eat food or you take care of your family or something. But today it's constant. It's always. You just go on your phone, and I'm a victim of that myself. But right now, we're outside. We're living in the world. So I think that we're doing great. I think I'm getting better without constant media. And the third one is materialism. The third issue is materialism. So nowadays, just like how we live in a hyper individualistic society, we live in a hyper material society. And people get gratification not just from social media, not just from this other stuff, but from buying things. They want to constantly buy things. And our economy and our society functions around money and around finance. And we work not to provide for our family, but to buy a new car. And so we can buy a new house. Or we're constantly climbing up this ladder, not so we can have a family, but so we can climb higher. So we can buy more things, so we can buy better things. You have a Subaru? No, you need a Lexus. Oh, you have a Lexus? No, you need to work harder so you can have a Ferrari or a Mercedes. Because there's always a step above. And our society teaches us, no, there's not a middle ground where we can stop and we can become happy with ourselves. No, we need to keep going constantly and constantly. We need to keep moving up that totem pole, keep moving up that ladder, and we can never stop. And that's really endless without any goal. That goes back to uh, Faust. It goes back to Faust. He made a deal with the devil so he could constantly want more and constantly do more. But the issue with that is it's like it's never ending. You never come to a point where you're satisfied. And in this society, you can never be satisfied because there's always more. And these people who fall down and they feel like they're broken and they feel like they're failures and they have to start all over again, they don't realize that it's not all about the money. It's not all about the job. It's about the connections you made. It's about the people you love and the people that love you. And these people nowadays who lose their job and want to kill themselves, they're forced into that situation by a society that teaches them that the only way they shouldn't kill themselves is if they get a new job and work harder. And that's a never ending cycle. And it's causing people to fall into this state. And I think that's a big reason why people are killing themselves, why it's the highest ever in our history. Um, Speaking of the things people buy, the material wealth, it's all impermanent, it's all temporary, and you get impermanent gratification. That's why you need to come back. That's why you want that dopamine boost every single time, because that dopamine only lasts for a few seconds, only lasts for a minute. It's the same thing with social media. You keep scrolling and you keep scrolling because that boost, that dopamine boost, only lasts for so long. And it's the same thing with buying stuff. It's the same thing with getting a job or getting a paycheck or getting a bonus. It's temporary. It's material. It's impermanent. And people rely on this, and they also rely on external gratification from other people who are proud of them for money and stuff. They're taught this by the people who say you need to get a good job, you need to become wealthy, and that's how you become successful, and you need to buy these new things. It's all external, and that means that we're not spending time internally. We're not spending time to think. We're not out here in the wilderness. We're not enjoying our time on this planet. We're letting it go by quickly, and we're making ourselves stressed on things that aren't going to matter in the long run. Are you going to be remembered because you owned a Ferrari? Or are you going to be remembered because all the people you met love you? And all the people that you met, you loved. And it goes back to Christianity. It goes back to Christ. You have to love everyone. And because Christ taught that his love is in you, and he will constantly love you no matter what. You fall down that totem pole, you have no one there. You have Christ. You have one person no matter what. Because Christ, God, will always love you no matter what. And we need to enact that in the world. We need to become like Christ. We need to forgive and we need to love people no matter what. We need to love that man on the street. And even though you get mad at him and you want to beat him up or something, I don't know. Even though you get mad at him, you got to love him. You got to help him out. You got to be part of a community, because this world isn't about the individual. This world isn't about yourself, because you can't take any of that self-wealth into the afterlife. You can't take that into heaven. You can't take your Ferrari. You can't take your gold doubloons into heaven. You take the people you love. You take the love that you shared. And it's like, it goes back to this impermanence, this temporary, this immaterial, this material and immaterial. The immaterial, the love, the relationships that you make with others, they last forever. That's a constant dopamine boost. It never ends. It's not one and then you need another. It's not like a vape. It's not like a cigarette where you need to keep going back. If you have a relationship, if you have people that love you, and if you love other people, that lasts forever. And there's no stopping that. And we need to embrace that love that Christ constantly gives us, because that will make us full for all time. It's not material. It's not impermanent. It's not temporary. It's everlasting. And God's love is everlasting, and we need to make our love everlasting for the people around us. Because if we make our love everlasting, their love will become everlasting for us, and we can bring about the kingdom of heaven. We can allow these people to not kill themselves because they know they feel loved. And we need to teach people that it's the relationships you make with others. It's the impact you leave on history, the impact you leave in the world. And that comes from what you do, not what you make, not the money you make, not what you buy. It's the impact you leave. And so I think because this is a pre-recorded episode and we got to go, the sun is setting. I think, can you give a beautiful view of what's going on? This over here. This is incredible. This is God's creation. This is how much God loves you. This is how much God loves me. This is how much I love you, because I want to share God's love, Christ's love, and we all need to do that. This is incredible, and I'm so glad I get to be here right now. I'm so glad I get to be in the Badlands, in God's creation, and I don't know. I hope this was the best episode yet. Wasn't that long, because we're not at home. We're on the road, but I hope I left an impact. A lot of looking at my notes, but it is what it is. I hope I left you with something. Go and love others. Go and sin no more. I sin. Everyone's a sinner. Try not to sin. Love others. Try not to sin. And by the way, loving others isn't constantly telling them and gratifying them and telling them that you're doing great and you're awesome. What you need to do is you need to tell them when they're doing wrong things. That's love. Love is rebuking others. Rebuking others means to tell them when they're doing something wrong, tell them when they're sinning, and to help them escape that sin. Because if you let them live that life of sin, if you tell them that they're being sinless and they're not making the mistakes, then they will continue to live in sin and they'll never reach heaven. So it's about loving others, and loving others does include telling them when they're doing something wrong. It includes rebuking others. And so I hope I've rebuked you. If you've done anything wrong, if you've felt depressed or sad today, I hope that I've helped. I hope I've helped this people at the New York Post and at the Washington Post realize their mistakes, because it's all about the stuff I talked about. It's not about traditional masculinity, because traditional masculinity has been around for 2,000 years and people weren't killing themselves 2,000 years ago like they are now. So it's not traditional masculinity. It's all this stuff that I talked about. And the solution is Christ. The solution is God. The solution is family. That's how we stop suicide in our society. That's how we stop suicide in this country. And I hope we can go forward with Christ and make that possible. Thank you.